it's been exacerbated by the illegal immigrants that have come into the country. So, I think we should be having an honest conversation with ourselves that people who are citizens of this country should be voting in this country. Like, I don't think I have the right to go vote in Canada under any circumstance, even though I spent 5 years up there. Under no circumstances should I be allowed to vote in a Canadian election. So I don't think it's unreasonable for people to show some form of ID. And I understand most people don't have a driver's license, but there's got to be some form of ID that people have to be able to vote. And I don't think there's got to be some type of methods to make sure that there isn't fraud taking place, but the people that are supposed to be voting can cast their vote, and it's not voter intimidation at the same time, or seen as voter intimidation at the same time. Will this blow back in his face? Possibly. We'll see how it goes. We'll see. Time will tell, I guess. But I think there's been calls on both sides for no voter IDs versus, everybody should have a voter ID or some type of identification when they go vote. I just have to go in and basically tell them where I live and sign something, and they kind of match it up with a signature. I think that's what they do. Maybe if it's that intensive, that's basically what they do. I'm like, wow, that's pretty shocking. I could have voted for all of my children right here or whomever, but I, of course, would never do something like that.
Hello and welcome. I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. President Donald Trump uses State of the Union stage to warn Iran over nuclear and security threats. He highlighted Iran's missile and nuclear activities as grave risks and hinted at possible stronger measures, even as he said diplomacy remains preferable. The top Democratic senator called US President Donald Trump's record-length Senate of the Union speech delusional and said it failed to address the struggles of ordinary Americans. Bill Gates took responsibility for his actions over ties to late financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in a town hall meeting with employees of the Gates Foundation. Documents released by the US Department of Justice had indicated that Gates and Epstein met repeatedly after Epstein's prison term. The UK's government is committing to releasing documents on ex-Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's past role as a trade envoy after the Jeffrey Epstein scandal widened with the arrest of the veteran UK politician. British police say searches at Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's former home in southeast England have concluded after the former prince was arrested last week of suspicion of misconduct in public office due to his ties with the late US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. China's Premier Li Qiang urged Germany to help safeguard global free trade. He said he was facing headwinds. He said China and Germany, as two major economies, should jointly safeguard multilateralism and free trade. Li told German Chancellor Friedrich Merz as the two met in Beijing. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Israel for a two-day visit that both countries have cast as a chance to deepen relations, as regional concerns mount over the risk of military conflict between the United States and Iran. The UN General Assembly voiced support for Ukraine on the 4th anniversary of Russia's invasion. It passed by a tally of 107 countries, with 12 against and 51 abstentions, which included the United States. And we start with some breaking news for this hour. The United States has deployed a dozen F-22 Raptor fighter jets to Israel, continuing its military build-up in the Middle East amid escalating tensions with Iran. Flight tracking data shows the jets left Britain heading towards the region ahead of crucial negotiations with Iran about its nuclear program. US officials confirmed the deployment, noting that some jets have already arrived in Israel. The F-22 Raptors, known for their advanced stealth capabilities, are seen as a sign of the US preparing for more aggressive stance towards Iran. Experts have emphasized that the deployment signals a potential cooperation between the US and Israel in case of a military action. This move adds to the growing US military presence in the region, which already includes 2 aircraft carrier strikes groups and over 60 fighter jets stationed in Jordan. And for your top stories this hour, US President Donald Trump announced a major energy deal for data centers during his State of Union address, saying the agreement would support rapidly growing digital infrastructure across the country. Trump said the deal would ensure reliable and affordable power for data centers as demands surge from artificial intelligence and cloud computing. He described the move as key to maintaining US technological leadership and attracting investment. Trump said the plan would create jobs and strengthen energy security while reducing reliance on foreign supply chains. Few details were provided, with officials saying more information would follow. We're now being joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky, who is a professor and Vice Dean, Jindal Global Law and School, who's joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. What are the potential benefits and pitfalls of President Trump's ratepayer protection pledge, which aims to have major tech companies generate their own electricity for AI data centers to prevent higher consumer energy bills?
Well, certainly this is a concern for many. Indeed, those centers need a lot of electricity, a lot of energy, and if they can produce their own, that would not add to the bill of everybody else, the regular consumer. So generally, that's possibly a good way to express that concern. But apart from that, I think not much we can think of assisting or adding. These are big corporations. They do a lot of research. They collect a lot of data. They operate independently from any governmental intervention. I really don't know why the president is talking about this. This is something that companies should do. He's a president, and less he intervenes in the business of every company, better. In fact, this is what traditionally the conservative parties do. They don't intervene in the business of private companies. And in America, those private companies are pretty strong. They don't need the president to tell them what to do. They will do the best for them and their shareholders. They understand the issue of need of extra electricity and energy. They will do it very clearly. So even if President Trump didn't say anything about this, that doesn't mean anything. For that matter, I didn't even watch the State of Union address. I didn't expect anything from this president. He proved to be basically useless because everything he says one week can be different the other week. He's so hectic and unpredictable, so that's very difficult, Eli, to comment on anything Donald Trump says because he doesn't know what he does say himself. He doesn't know what he does mean himself. So for observers, it's just a statement without any much to comment on. I'm sorry.
And could this initiative mark a shift in how governments or private tech companies share responsibility for the energy demands of rapidly expanding AI infrastructure, or is it primarily a political response to public utility cost concern?
I guess I go for your second hypothesis here that it's, for some reason, Donald Trump wanted, for political reason, he wanted to mention that. As I mentioned, the companies know what they do. They understand the problem or they know the solution. They don't need the president to tell them anything. These are powerful companies. They are well established. They do a lot of research. They have a lot of data. But yes, it's a general problem about not United States, but developing countries where you need extra energy to develop research and technology. And possibly countries that don't have enough resources, but also are under pressure to reduce fossil fuel burning for energy. They need to face that dilemma, if I can put it. But I hope the artificial intelligence itself will solve that problem. Over time, it will be an energy efficiency business. So for that matter, it will not create any major problem. Although we have the concern of climate change and reducing to low carbon, to less emissions. But also the AI demands a lot of energy. So that there is a dilemma, but obviously it's not in the hands of Donald Trump, even less. United States don't need to worry about that. Their tech companies are strong enough to deal with every such challenge.
And what might be the broader implications of this announcement for US competitiveness in AI and digital infrastructure globally, especially as other countries are also racing to expand their data center capacity?
Yes, that's a good question. There are competitions. Obviously, United States, but also China. These are the two front runners. And if you take European Union together, probably a third one. India does a lot of research and also open data centers. So these are the big players geopolitically and also technologically. So yes, for all of them, the dilemma which we discussed,
टाटा पे दर्शन के संग मात्र ₹2
dilemma, what capacity they develop as to meet the energy efficiency of the tech companies. Producing big data is very high consuming. They have to deal with that. But generally, they understand the problem. I talked to many people who are dealing with the AI. The recently concluded summit, by the way, in Delhi also discussed that. The AI Impact Summit convened by Prime Minister Modi in Delhi also discussed that. So yes, there are challenges, but these are manageable, mostly by the...
Yes.
But it's always good to hear from a president of the largest economy in the world, United States, also expressing that.
Exactly. Thank you, but please don't go too far, as we will be back with you very shortly. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger has sharply criticised President Donald Trump's State of the Union address, accusing him of failing to deliver on promises related to cost of living, safety and humanity. In a pointed rebuttal, Spanberger called Trump's speech a distortion of reality, highlighting the economic struggles of everyday Americans under his policies. She also condemned his administration's handling of immigration and public safety, calling for reforms to address issues like housing, healthcare, and affordable energy. She also addressed Trump's foreign policy, accusing him of weakening the US's position globally by aligning with Russia and China. Let's listen in to what Virginia Governor Abigail had to say.
This president took office last year. His reckless trade policies have forced American families to pay more than $1,700 each in tariff costs. Small businesses have suffered, farmers have suffered, some losing entire markets. Everyday Americans are paying the price. And even though the Supreme Court struck these tariffs down 4 days ago, the damage to us, the American people, has already been done.
We are now being rejoined by Professor Veselin Popovsky. Thank you for rejoining us here. What does Abigail Spanberger's sharp critics of President Trump's economic and immigration policies in her democratic response tell us about the emerging political narrative ahead of the 2026 midterm elections?
Well, certainly the senator from Virginia is absolutely correct here. And it is not the Democrats speaking. If we take the economic analysis of the last year, and it signals all of those horrible policies, domestic and international, the reckless tariffs, they hit back the American consumers and producers. By the way, every restriction on trade, and tariffs are perfect, par excellence, restriction on trade, over time produced that. So Trump is not the first idiot that introduced tariffs and restrictions, and that always played very badly over the domestic people. But again, it can look at as a response by the opposition, by the Democratic Party. But if we take every serious analyst on the Trump's policy, it will say exactly the same. And the consumers, the American people, are those who suffer first and foremost. They experience those increases in prices, in taxes, and everything he promised didn't work. Let's put it simply like that. He didn't do any peace agreement around the world. That was absolute nonsense, what he declares that he ended 7 wars. None of these ended, by the way. They are still fighting in Congo and everywhere else. And if something ended, it was not because Donald Trump did it. It is because the two parties agreed to do that, like Armenia, Azerbaijan. And domestically, the result of the tariffs and of the reckless economic policies and restrictions. And migration is also absolutely nowhere with those IC units going and torturing people around not only Minneapolis, but everywhere else. So over time, yes, I hope the American voters in November will make their proper choice, and this president will have not much time left, probably another State of Union address, and he will be impeached soon after that. Well, let's see how things go, but nothing else to expect here from Donald Trump, both internationally and, as I said, I didn't watch the speech. I didn't expect anything. It's a waste of time. To listen to Donald Trump is a waste of time. I don't recommend anybody doing that. Thank you.
And Spanberger's argues that Trump's tariff and One Big Beautiful Bill policies have increased costs for everyday Americans. How compelling is this argument in the context of broader debates over affordability and the economy?
Yeah, very good speech, by the way. But the Democratic senator was very correct here, that she said what everybody knows, that the rising cost of life for the Americans will be seen. And again, this was against all the promises he made before the elections. Everybody understands now that Donald Trump lied, and lied big, to win the elections. And now the American people have to carry the burden of all that, paying more and suffering more and losing jobs and having tariffs lead exactly to losing jobs, not the other way around. So yes, as I said, it looks like a statement by the Democratic Party, but for that matter, it doesn't mean, it doesn't say what exactly the situation today is. It says the truth, that the American people will bear the cost of their choice last year and a half ago, choosing Donald Trump as their president. Unfortunately, that's the situation there.
Thank you so much, Professor Veselin, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are set to meet Ukraine's Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov, in Geneva on February the 26th. Witkoff added that he had asked Umerov to get permission from Volodymyr Zelensky for a meeting in Geneva to continue the talks and explore different options for a peace agreement. Witkoff expressed hopes that the next round of negotiations for the Ukrainian settlement will take place within the next 10 days. This comes after the most recent round of talks held in Geneva on February the 17th to the 18th, which were described as difficult but productive. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has departed for Tel Aviv, embarking on a two-day state visit to Israel. During the visit, PM Modi will become the first Indian Prime Minister to address Israel's parliament, the Knesset. His address is seen as a significant milestone in the strengthening of bilateral ties between the two nations. PM Modi visit comes amidst ongoing geopolitical tensions in West Asia. The visit will focus on deepening cooperation between India and Israel, particularly in defense, trade, technology and innovation. PM Modi is expected to hold discussions with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on various issues, including regional security and economic growth. The visit will also include visits to Yad Vashem, Holocaust Memorial Museum and an interaction with the Indian diaspora in Israel. Both nations are looking to set new goals for their partnership, with particular attention to areas such as agriculture, water, management and people-to-people exchanges. The trip is set to further enhance India-Israel relations with a focus on security cooperation, innovation and building a resilient future. We're now going to Major General Gigi Davidi, who is a war veteran and professor and in international relations and strategic studies, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you very much.
My first question is, what are the core strategic goals behind PM Modi's agenda in Israel, from defense cooperation to economic partnerships? How might these shape India's broader foreign policy priorities in the Middle East?
Well, Ali, India and Israel, they enjoy very close relations which cover wide spectrum, the strategic issues, the trade issues, the defense, and also people-to-people relations. So therefore, these are the key areas or key pillars of the India-Israel relation. But before I come to the specific question, it's very important to understand that this visit comes at a very crucial time, when there is a heightened tension in West Asia, especially with the way Americans have amassed their forces and their tension is there between Iran and America. Now, coming to the visit per se, this is the second visit of Prime Minister Modi. First visit was in 2017. And as I stated, that the relation between Israel and India are multifaceted. First and foremost, Israel has been a very dependable partner as far as security is concerned, and some of the weapon systems which have been jointly developed, like the Barak 8, their performance was outstanding during the skirmish between India and Pakistan last May during Operation Sindoor. So Israel has been a great partner in developing these platforms and also the surveillance systems and the high technology transfer of the various weapon systems. That's the one dimension. Second is the strategic partnership. India and Israel are on the same page as far as terrorism is concerned. They also share the similar views on the regional issues. And another important factor is the connectivity, like the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor is also very important, because in case there is a blockade of Suez or there is a certain development of security concern, then this is an important connectivity. And the third important point is trade. While the trade between the two countries is hardly about $3.75 billion, but there is a lot of scope in expanding the trade. And the last point is the political dimension, because as I said that Israel and India are very close partners, and they have multifaceted relations, and also the people-to-people contacts. So all put together, all I can say is that this visit is going to give further momentum and further consolidate the relationship between India and Israel. Ally.
And what diplomatic message does Modi send by addressing the Israeli parliament and holding high-level talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at this particular geopolitical moment?
Well, Alan, first and foremost, our relation erstwhile used to be hyphenated between Israel and Palestine. That's no more the case. So India has taken this visit, in fact, as a standalone visit. It's not tied up with any other visit. So that means that first message that is conveyed is the growing partnership between India and Israel, and addressing the parliament, Knesset, is also a very strong message. This is the first time that Indian Prime Minister would be doing so. The second message is that India is an important player in the region, and therefore India has to be taken into consideration, and its interests also have to be factored when we talk about the West Asia region, because remember that India has very close relation with the Gulf countries. India also has close relation with the other nations like Egypt. So therefore, this has to be taken into the larger perspective that India is a strong player in this region. And the third point is that while the tensions are on, while the region is in high sort of state of readiness for any contingency, India has offered itself that it can also play a role to tone down the tensions and also help in the negotiation process that is going on, because President Trump had recently floated the border peace in which 50 countries are on it, and India is also an observer on this issue. So therefore, all put together, I think India is positioning itself well in this region. It is an important player, and also it is willing to play an important role in the larger geopolitical dimension of West Asia. Ally.
Thank you so much, Major General Gigi Davidi, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
The physics was known for quite a while, and so I think it hasn't really changed our understanding the quantum world work.
Job with the James Webb Space Telescope was to look as far back in time as we could to see the universe as it was young.
Changing the basic attitude about what education is for and what it needs to be.
Biology, medical studies, they make great progress.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Trending Tech on NewsX World, where we bring you the latest breakthroughs and trends from around the world. AI is transforming many things across the world, one of them being the way consumers shop today. With a shift towards personalized data-driven experiences now, AI is not just improving e-commerce, it's changing how products are discovered and purchased. Consumers are increasingly trusting AI chatbots and search tools, particularly in fashion and beauty, over traditional reviews and the influencers. Platforms like TikTok and Instagram are integrating AI into feeds, making it a key driver of product discovery, especially among Gen Zs. As AI continues to reshape the retail landscape, it's transforming everything from loyalty programs to holiday shopping strategies, and the future is poised for even greater innovation. To discuss all this and more, joining us now is Ms. Sky Canavis. She's a principal analyst on the retail and e-commerce desk at eMarketer. Her work spans around the categories of fashion, beauty, and luxury. Moreover, her subject matter areas of expertise include loyalty, social commerce, marketplaces, holiday retail, and Chinese e-commerce. Before joining eMarketer, Sky was a content director at Jing Daily, where she led a team producing in-depth research reports on China's luxury sector. Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Sky Canavis. My first question to you is, we're hearing that AI isn't just improving e-commerce, it's fundamentally changing how consumers shop. From your research at eMarketer, what's the biggest behavioral shift you're seeing in how people discover and buy products with AI?
Well, one of the biggest shifts is just how rapidly consumers are adopting AI and using it in all sorts of different ways in their shopping journeys, for product recommendations, product research, and now they can even buy through AI platforms, although that's still very nascent and new. I think one of the biggest broad shifts we're seeing in how consumers use AI and the impact that's having is in this transition from keyword-based search to conversational and more multimodal forms of inquiry. And that in turn will shape how retailers respond. So we're still in the very early stages of this shift, but we can see that even traditional search behavior is being impacted. So search engine queries on a platform like Google are becoming much longer. It's no longer a string of a few keywords, but they're more likely to be full sentences or questions that have a lot more nuance and context behind them. And users are also incorporating a lot more voice search and visual search as well.
Are consumers beginning to trust AI chatbots and generative search tools as personal shopping assistants, particularly in fashion and beauty, or are they still relying more on traditional reviews and influencers?
I think the traditional reviews and other forms of authentic user-generated content are still very critical to the consumer journey, and that's no matter whether the consumer is going straight to the source, to the content from users or creators or reviews, or whether they're using an AI chatbot or assistant. And that's because the LLMs, the most cited types of content that they turn to is from platforms that are based on user content and reviews. These are platforms such as Reddit and YouTube that show up a lot in LLM answers. So the LLMs are relying on creator content and reviews for authority, and shoppers also tend to go to those sources to validate their answers, the answers that they're getting from AI chatbots. So they might get a response that tells them about a product or refers to certain reviews, and then they go and look it up again. In terms of beauty and fashion, I would say the use cases are somewhat divided among these two. In beauty, for example, a lot of the growth we're seeing in the industry is coming from the skincare and hair care sectors. And these are more functional types of beauty, where AI can really help shoppers when they're conducting research on ingredients and looking for reviews to see if a product is suitable for them. While fashion, on the other hand, it's so highly individualized, and it's an area where consumers are much more likely to want to express their personal style themselves rather than outsourcing that to an AI. But I think the AI tools can still be very helpful in helping to source specific products. We see this in the sector of resale or secondhand fashion, where it can be so hard to cut through the clutter and there are so many products available.
Now, platforms like TikTok and Instagram are integrating AI into feeds, recommendations, and live shopping. Is AI now driving product discovery more than search engines, especially among Gen Zs?
No, a lot of Gen Z discovery has shifted to those social platforms, and their algorithms are a big part of what drives their success. But I would say that outside of social, AI platforms are still pretty nascent as a discovery channel. And that's from our own research at eMarketer on the consumer path to purchase. We found that only about 4% of shoppers had reported discovering new products or brands through AI platforms such as ChatGPT. And that was just 1/10 of the discovery driven by social platforms. We had close to 40% of shoppers overall said that they had discovered new brands or products through social media. And I think that holds true across generations, but more notably, especially, it's still physical stores that drive the most product discovery for US shoppers. That's the top single channel. And we also see that most spending, more than 80% of consumer spending in the US, still takes place in physical stores. So we have to put AI and e-commerce into that context, that it will still be a small sliver of overall spending, even as AI-driven commerce grows very rapidly. And even among Gen Z, we see that Gen Z is really fueling a resurgence in store shopping in the US. Part of that is because their lives are so digitally saturated that they're looking for in-person, real-world experiences to kind of offset all of the digital activity that they engage in.
And given your experience leading research on China's luxury sector at Jing Daily, how are Chinese e-commerce platforms using AI differently, and are Western retailers playing catch-up?
I think it's not necessarily catch-up because China is so far ahead when it comes to e-commerce penetration and digital innovation. We have more than 50% of all retail sales in China take place online versus less than 20% in the US. And the innovation is faster because the market is so much more competitive. And on the consumer side, we also see much higher trust and acceptance of AI in retail in China. There's a lot more, I would say, AI optimism in China than in the US, where there's still a lot of caution and hesitancy and consumer trust issues that still have to be addressed.
Thank you for sharing that. And Ms. Guy, large marketplaces are deploying advanced recommendation engines and predictive analytics. What separates AI personalization that genuinely boosts basket size from AI that just overwhelms shoppers?
So I think one of the most interesting developments I'm keeping an eye on is how the major retailers are integrating their AI shopping assistants throughout the shopping experiences, both on their apps and websites. And at what point will these assistants become the default interface for shopping on these platforms? So here in the US, Amazon has Rufus and Walmart has Sparky. And when they first launched, they were essentially buttons that a user had to proactively tap on to start a conversation with them. And now we see them taking a much more proactive role. They're appearing on the home screens, offering to restock frequently purchased products. They're appearing as prompts showing FAQs on product detail pages. So these create many more opportunities for shoppers to interact with them and become accustomed to having that ever-present shopping assistant accompanying them on their shopping journeys. So I think it's a gradual approach, but from our research, we see that more consumers are finding these tools to be helpful than not helpful. And so as a result, I think the conversion rates and basket sizes from shoppers that are using AI assistants will tend to be higher. And it's not necessarily causation, because one important point to note is that the shoppers using these AI assistants, they may already have a higher purchase intent or be more invested in making a purchase. And so that may factor into what drives them to use the chatbot in the first place. But the retailers are really seeing a strong positive correlation, and they're proceeding accordingly to move their shopping assistants into a more prominent role.
Now, retailers have more consumer data than ever through loyalty programs. How is AI transforming loyalty from simple point systems to predictive, hyper-targeted engagement tools?
Retailers have long been using machine learning and more traditional forms of AI to personalize loyalty offerings. I think what's different now is the ability to develop stronger and more dynamic loyalty relationships using new AI tools or more advanced technologies. So one of the most cited use cases among consumers for AI agents in shopping is to help them maximize loyalty points. That's according to some Salesforce research that we've cited. So there are opportunities for retailers to add more loyalty awareness to their native shopping assistants, and that would help their loyalty members make the most of their benefits. I think we'll also see retailers looking to integrate their loyalty programs into third-party AI platforms, such as ChatGPT or Gemini, so that shoppers using these platforms can enjoy the benefits of being a loyalty member through these channels as well.
And holiday shopping is increasingly powered by AI forecasting and demand modeling. How much are retailers now relying on AI to determine pricing, inventory, and promotions, and where can that strategy backfire?
So this is another area where traditional AI, machine learning tools, and predictive analytics have long played a role in retail, and their use is very well established to the point that these are must-haves because they really help to improve efficiency and profitability. I think where we see the most innovation as well as potential for backlash is in pricing and promotions. So we already know that highly variable surge pricing is a reality in sectors like transportation, travel, and hospitality. And dynamic pricing is quite prevalent across online marketplaces where prices constantly fluctuate. But there's a big risk in personalization in pricing if different consumers are charged different prices for the same product based on an understanding of their past purchasing behavior or their demographic profiles. That would be perceived as price discrimination, and it's likely to provoke a strong backlash and erode trust among consumers. I think there's generally greater tolerance among consumers for personalized promotions or discounts, but especially when that's tied to loyalty. However, even there, in certain markets, it could be interpreted by regulators as price discrimination. So retailers have to walk a fine line there.
And Ms. Guy, now looking ahead, which emerging AI tools or platforms, whether conversational commerce, visual search, virtual try-on, or agentic AI, do you believe will have the greatest impact on global retail over the next 5 years?
I think the AI platforms like ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Perplexity, these are all new channels that require new approaches from retailers. And retailers now have to prepare for a world in which there are three types of consumers. There's the human consumer, who now has heightened expectations around value, convenience, and customer service. And then there's the human consumer using AI, and that consumer's relationship with retailers and brands is mediated by LLMs now, and how the LLMs filter and present information. And then the third type of consumer is the AI agent, and that would be a consumer that is acting autonomously, is essentially a bot, and they can make decisions and purchases on behalf of consumers and interact with other agents. So there isn't as much human involvement involved. Now we hear so much buzz about agentic commerce taking over and agents taking over shopping, but that is a pretty far-fetched scenario. I think giving final say over spending is a really hard ask for consumers because it will come down to trust and how long it will take to win that confidently. I think over the next 5 years, the biggest impact is going to come from the rise of that hybrid human AI consumer. The human consumer will become even more sophisticated with AI playing a larger role, and retailers will really have to deepen their understanding of what both human consumers are looking for and what their AI assistants or agents are looking for and adapt to meet their needs. So the content and data will have to be optimized both so that bots can read it and surface it in conversations, and so that it appeals to the human consumer, who is the ultimate decision maker. And I think that's a part of a journey that will take place not only online in digital environments, but also in stores. As I mentioned, most retail, more than 80% of spending still takes place in stores. Human consumers are increasingly bringing their AI assistants on their phones into stores, whether that's a retailer assistant or a third-party assistant or a chatbot, and how retailers, start to think about their store environments and the in-store shopping experience to meet the needs of the AI-powered human consumer is really going to be a great opportunity over the next 5 years.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sky Canavis, for joining us on this episode of Trending Tech. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of the Trending Tech. For more tech updates and innovations, stay tuned to NewsX World.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi, during Operation Sindoor, made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive on NewsX World. I'm Ellie Richardson. Today we focus on one of the most significant global conflicts of our time, the Russia-Ukraine war. Now entering its 5th year, despite intense international pressure and multiple rounds of peace talks, an end to the fighting still remains elusive. The question on every global leader's mind is no longer just who is winning, but rather how close are we to a peace deal. The current state of negotiations has seen an unprecedented movement since the start of 2026. 3 rounds of US mediated talks have taken place in Abu Dhabi and Geneva, and making a significant shift from the stalemate of previous years. While these sessions have facilitated the first prisoner exchanges in months, the meaningful progress reported by diplomats has yet to touch the core issues of land and liberty. Central to this new monumentum is evolving US role under the Trump administration. Washington has transformed from a silent partner in defense to the primary architect of the peace track. US envoy Steve Witkoff is pushing a sense of urgency, driven by the belief that the window for a favorable outcome for Kyiv is closing. However, the America First mediation has left Europe allies in a strategic panic, fearing that a hasty deal brokered in Washington could sacrifice long-term continental stability for a short-term diplomatic win. At the heart of the deadlock is the irreconcilable clash between Ukrainian sovereignty and Russian territorial demands. Vladimir Putin has not shied away from his maximalist goals, demanding full control over provinces his troops do not yet fully occupy and declaring that all of Ukraine is ours. Contrast with this, President Zelensky's 10-point peace formula, which rigidly demands a return to the 2014 borders. For Kyiv, surrendering land for peace is not a settlement, it is a trap that would allow Russia to ram and strike again. Then there is a critical question of who polices the peace, the role of peacekeepers. As talks progress, the necessity of a neutral buffer force has become clear. Yet, this remains a minefield. Would a European-led force be acceptable to Moscow? Would Ukraine trust anyone other than NATO to guard the line of contact? Without a robust peacekeeping architecture, any ceasefire signed today is likely to be ignored tomorrow. Let's listen in to the President of Ukraine.
Путін не досягнув своїх цілей, не зламав українців, не переміг в цій війні. Ми зберегли Україну і ми зробимо все, щоб здобути мир і щоб була справедливість. До весни менше тижня ми долаємо найважчу зиму в історії. Це факт. І це дуже непросто. Непросто всім вам. Але так само, як у перший день війни, ми продовжуємо будувати своє завтра. Крок за кроком, справа за справою, здобуток за здобутком.
Finally, we face the NATO deal breaker. Russia's demand is absolute. Ukraine must officially abandon its aspirations to join the alliance. For Ukraine, NATO membership is the only security guarantee that matters. The current negotiations are searching for a third way interim security arrangement that provide protection without formal alliance membership. But neither side has yet bent the knee on this existential point. As we enter this fifth year, the will to fight remains staggering. While a cessation of active hostilities may be realistic by the end of 2026, a true comprehensive settlement remains a distant prospect. Ukraine stands at a crossroads, caught between an aggressive peace push from Washington and an unrelenting enemy in the east. As the world watches, the question remains: will the Russia-Ukraine war end soon, or will it continue to reshape Europe's geopolitical future? Glenn Grant, ex-advisor to Defence Minister of Ukraine and a geopolitical commentator, is now joining us from Kyiv. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us here for Deep Dive. My first question is, after 3 rounds of US-mediated peace talks in Abu Dhabi and Geneva, how effective do you believe these negotiations have been in addressing the core issues of the conflict, such as territorial disputes and sovereignty?
Okay, I'm in Lviv, not Kiev, by the way, and I'm standing outside the railway station and waiting for my bus back to Riga. To answer your questions and listening to what you've said, that there is too much in what you've said previously, including about the peace talks, that is basically, you could call it public relations and media hype. The truth of the matter is a lot different from, in many cases, from what you've been saying. There are no peace talks. Let's be clear about this. There's just delay talks. Russia is delaying on one side. It has not changed its demands one tiny bit from the beginning of the war. Ukraine has not changed its demand, which is we keep our land and we're not giving any to Russia. So anything surrounding that, when you hear people say we are 90% close on the military bits. This is just flannel. This is just keeping people happy. In the main, keeping Donald Trump happy that something is happening towards his Nobel Peace Prize. But the reality is we are exactly the same as we were 1 year ago and 2 years ago. Ukraine is fighting for its life, and Russia is fighting badly and trying to keep going.
Ukraine and Russia remain deeply divided over territorial control, with Ukraine demanding the restoration of its 2014 borders. What are the realistic pathways for resolving this conflict, especially when both sides seem unwilling to compromise on key territorial issues?
It's the same as it's been since the beginning. The only thing that is going to clear this up is war. This is an existential threat to national sovereignty of Ukraine. So Ukraine has to fight for its very survival. And I do not see any weakening on the part of Ukraine anywhere to give up and let Russia dominate them. So it's going to keep going. The key is how long Russia can keep going. How long can it keep finding people to die? Because the front line is grossly corrupt that the Russians are using. They're just killing their own people while people are making money out of it. And at the same time, their economy is beginning to, it's not grinding to a halt, but it's beginning to falter. So the big thing is likely to be money that actually brings this war to a halt. And it's likely to be the money inside Russia, when people can no longer afford to buy the equipment for weapons and no longer afford to buy decent groceries. Then we might see change. But I don't see anything else changing this war. It's just going to keep going until someone cracks. And it won't be Ukraine that cracks.
And the idea of a neutral peacekeeping force has been discussed in peace talks, but the challenge remains in finding an acceptable solution for both Ukraine and Russia. How do you foresee the role of peacekeepers evolving, and what would be required for both parties to trust such a force?
I don't see it evolving at all, because it's a nonsense. It's just something to keep people and politicians happy. In the first place, Europe hasn't got enough soldiers to put anywhere to make a delaying force. Germany has said they won't help support. Italy has said they won't support. Poland will not move outside its boundaries. There are no other countries that have sufficient people to put there. If you took the French and the English troops, they could merely cover 1/30th of the front line, which means not at all. So there's no movement on this whatsoever. And I do not believe that Turks or Indonesians or whatever would be acceptable to either side. And anyway, it's only going to come after a peace deal. And at the moment, we are miles away from a peace deal. So I think that this is just a red herring. This is just keeping people away from the fact that they have to do something to win the war. And this seems easier to politicians. So I wouldn't bother going there. It's a waste of time.
With multiple rounds of peace talks mediated by the US and other international stakeholders, what do you believe is the role of non-state actors, such as the UN or regional organisations, in influencing the outcome of these negotiations? How can they help ensure that the talks move beyond just a ceasefire to a sustainable peace?
They can't. They have no power, and nobody trusts them. UN is a busted flush. Nobody trusts it. It's got no power to do anything. I don't believe there are any other actors at all. This war is only going to be solved between Russia and Ukraine. And anybody who thinks otherwise is, I'm afraid, is just dreaming, because it's an unreality. And after 4 years of seeing the reality, it's about time that the international community actually understood that, it is only by facing the reality that this is an existential war that will we ever get anywhere towards peace. The rest of it is dreams, or it's Trump's ambitions to try and get himself a Nobel Peace Prize and to try and steal the best, you might call it the best resources from either from Ukraine and from Russia. But if he goes there with Russia, they're not going to give him anything anyway. They never have done. They'll only lie to him and he will accept it. So we need to get back to reality, to what this war is, and understand that only winning it by one side or the other will it end.
And given the current geopolitical climate and the ongoing military situation, do you think a realistic peace deal could be achieved by the end of 2026, or are we facing a prolonged conflict?
No, the way we're going at the moment, if Europe doesn't sort itself out and actually support Ukraine properly, we're looking at least another 3 years, maybe even longer. And remember that this is already a 12-year war. So it's not a 4-year war, it's a 12-year war. So I think that we have to be realistic about this.
The physics was known for quite a while, and so that I think it hasn't really changed our understanding the quantum world work.
Our job with the James Webb Space Telescope was to look as far back in time as we could to see the universe as it was young.
Changing the basic attitude about what education is for and what it needs to be.
Biology, medical studies, they make great progress.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there.
Hello and welcome. I'm Ruby Barlow and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the headlines of this hour. President Donald Trump uses the State of the Union stage to warn Iran over nuclear and security threats. He highlighted Iran's missile and nuclear activities as grave risks and hinted at possible stronger measures, even as he said diplomacy remains preferable. The top Democratic senator called US President Donald Trump's record-length State of the Union speech delusional and said it failed to address the struggles of ordinary Americans. Bill Gates took responsibility for his actions over ties to late financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in a town hall meeting with employees of the Gates Foundation. Documents released by the US Department of Justice has indicated that Gates and Epstein met repeatedly after Epstein's prison term. The UK government is committing to releasing documents on ex-Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's past role as a trade envoy, after the Jeffrey Epstein scandal widened with the arrest of a veteran UK politician. British police say searches at Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's former home in southeast England have concluded after the former prince was arrested last week on suspicion of misconduct in public office, due to his ties with late US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. China's Premier Li Qiang urged Germany to help safeguard global free trade he said was facing headwinds. He said China and Germany, as two major economies, should jointly safeguard multilateralism and free trade. Li told German Chancellor Friedrich Merz as the two met in Beijing. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Israel on Wednesday for a two-day visit that both countries have cast as a chance to deepen relations as regional concerns mount over the risk of military conflict between the United States and Iran. The UN General Assembly voiced support for Ukraine on the 4th anniversary of Russia's invasion. It passed by a tally of 107 countries, with 12 against and 51 abstentions, which included the United States. And now to our top story. In his State of the Union address, US President Donald Trump claimed that the Russia-Ukraine war would never have occurred if he had been in office. He highlighted the ongoing efforts to end the conflict, stressing the significant loss of life, with 25,000 soldiers dying each month in the war. Trump asserted that his administration would have prevented such a war, positioning himself as a leader capable of avoiding international conflicts. He pointed out the gravity of the situation, emphasizing the human cost of the ongoing violence. Trump's remarks underscore his stance on international diplomacy, presenting himself as someone who could have successfully managed relations to prevent the crisis in Ukraine. The statement was part of his broader critique of President Biden's handling of the situation, emphasizing his belief in his own foreign policy approach. Now joining us live, we have Ben Aris, who is a former Moscow bureau chief from the Daily Telegraph in Berlin. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Now, what do you think is the significance of Trump bringing up a hypothetical situation from a previous administration? Is it to distract from the cost of living crisis that everyday Americans are going through, or perhaps the Epstein files, a massive scandal that his administration is also dealing with at the moment?
Well, you said the key word, hypothetical. You know, it's hard to take comments from Trump like this seriously, because my working hypothesis is that it's all bluster designed to flatter his own ego. And that, of course, that had he been president forever, then the world would be a perfect place. As to the ins and outs of it, had he been president at the time, the whole thing came down to, in December 2021, in the lead up to the war, that the Kremlin was demanding, first and foremost, no NATO ever for Ukraine. And the Biden administration dug its heels in and said that they wouldn't, even hypothetically, bar Ukraine from ever joining NATO. Having said that, there's never been any intention to allow Ukraine to join NATO. Indeed, Zelensky has said over and over again, he's demanded NATO membership, and he's been told to talk to the hand. No one's interested in doing that. And if you had Trump in that position running the government at the time, it's more than likely, given that he's a deal maker, that he would have offered this guarantee that Ukraine never joins NATO. It just takes one NATO member to veto a decision to ensure it can't join, because you need unanimity for anyone to join. As for distraction, I don't even think he thinks that deeply. Yes, it is a distraction. Not that the Americans care too much about it. I mean, Trump went into the elections, his re-election campaign, promising to end this war within 24 hours, and we're now just gone into the 5th year, so that didn't work. And he has a problem in the midterms coming up, having made that claim that he could stop it immediately, and having totally failed to do it. So what's the obvious solution is to pass the buck to the Biden administration and say, actually, they created an impossible situation with an endless war, and it's nothing to do with me.
Now, Ben, Trump has also claimed that he was responsible for ending 6 or 7 other wars that we have globally. Does this statement show, and his previous statement in the State of the Union address, does it show that his mentality about leadership in global conflict, and how does this change the perception of leadership of nations and their role in managing conflicts to the public as well? Does that shift the responsibility for the public to leaders rather than entire governments?
Well, to be fair to him, he has been successful in bringing several conflicts to an end, although the deals that have been done, if you dig into them, are relatively superficial. It remains to be seen in the Armenia-Azerbaijan case, for example, whether that holds or not. But again, my working hypothesis that this is all designed to flatter his ego, and he sees himself as some sort of messianic bringer of peace to the world. And he does genuinely have an agenda to end conflicts. I mean, the focus has switched back to Gaza. And again, the Americans have actually brokered talks between Ukraine and Russia for the first time in 4 years. And so we have a real peace process going on there, which might actually deliver results. So in that sense, he's, I don't want to use the word statesman, but he has engineered these talks that are going forward by focusing on it and pushing very hard and being very aggressive. I mean, in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, for example, he seems to have conceded that Putin's not going to make any concessions whatsoever, and he's bought into that line. And so he's brought heavy pressure onto Zelensky to make the concession that Putin's demanding. So it's kind of one-sided, and it's not going to be the just peace that Zelensky is after. But bottom line is there may be a peace deal, which is actually what everyone wants and is what is needed.
Now, just on what you were saying about Putin and his insistence in this case, do you take Trump's statement seriously? Would the Ukraine-Russia war have gone ahead regardless of the president, taking into account that there are so many regional and global factors that have influenced the Ukraine-Russia war so far?
Well, what this boils down to is where you stand on the issue of NATO expansion. And there's a camp, which I belong to, that believes that Putin was, it's a security issue for Russia, that if Ukraine joins NATO, then like in Poland, like in Romania, you end up with NATO missiles in those countries. And the problem for Putin is that if you put NATO missiles on the Ukraine-Russia border, then you've got a 5-minute flight time to 80% of Russia's population. They all live in that European strip down the Ukraine border. If you believe, and many do, that Putin is out to destroy Ukraine, to rebuild the Soviet Union, then it wouldn't have made any difference because Putin was fixated on doing that and he was going to invade anyway. But if you, in the NATO camp, then doing the NATO deal, precluding Ukraine from ever joining NATO, would have stopped it. And like I said before, I actually think that Trump is probably a candidate for having done the deal and to stop the war, because he is, at the end of the day, very interested in doing business with Russia. He's brought no real effective sanctions on Russia at all since he took over. And that is so that he doesn't want to screw up his potential deal. And it's been reported, Zelensky even was the one to come up with this, that apparently there's a $12 trillion package of deals on the table covering everything from fertilizers to gas to nuclear power to agriculture to aeroplanes to consumer companies. It's an absolute bonanza of business if it goes ahead. And that's what Trump is looking at. And that's what makes him soft on Putin, because Putin is very cleverly tickling that particular trout and offering to do these joint ventures. So it remains to be seen if we get to a ceasefire and they happen. But had we gone back to 2021, December, when it got really fraught, the diplomacy, and Putin tickled the trout then and said, like, let's give me no Ukraine in NATO and I'll give you oil, gas, diamonds, gold, fertilizers, raw material, rare earth metals, everything you want, Trump would have taken that deal.
Right. And so in responding to the State of the Union, should journalists be even interrogating these hypothetical situations that Trump brings up? Is this just another display of showmanship from him to distract from the fact that he does have very strong business interests in Russia?
Yeah, I mean, Trump is all showmanship. There's very little substance. For me, to understand him, it's very simple. You just look at the money, the deals. And the one thing he's doing, and actually the one thing he's got right, is to concede that the US is over the barrel when it comes to critical minerals and rare earth metals, because these are essential to American technology and they are completely dependent on China. So those 6 to 8 peace deals that you mentioned earlier that he's done, each one, or at least 6 of them, have come with major mineral concessions tacked onto the peace agreement for the US companies. And that's what he's doing. He's going around the world and he's looking at all these situations. Greenland too. I mean, Greenland is, as far as Trump is talking about a security issue, but actually it's packed with minerals as well, which is another reason why he wants to, quote unquote, annex it. And if you look at it from that perspective, then it actually becomes much simpler to understand what he's doing. He's looking at a conflict, he's looking at a country, he's looking at the mineral deposits it has, and if it has significant minerals or oil, then he will go in and throw his weight around, broker a peace deal. But as part of those negotiations, he will take out a concession deal. And the prime example is, and his first conflict was the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But that came, if you remember, at the beginning of the process, where he forced Kiev to sign off on a very advantageous for the US minerals deal. And then once that was signed, then he started to talk about peace and talk about arms and funding and what have you. So I think he's very straightforward. And journalists, I don't think they have to do much work. I mean, you listen to Trump's bluster on the podium behind the lectern, you can ignore most of it. And in that sense, it reminds me of covering Boris Yeltsin in the 90s, that we never listened to a word he said because he said crazy things, and you just look at what he does.
Right. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today in the studio. Pleasure to have you on the show. Now, moving to Asia, a Japanese national has been held in Iran since the 20th of January, and that Tokyo has strongly demanded the person's swift release, Japanese officials said at a press briefing. Japan's Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary confirmed the detention but gave no further details on charges or circumstances, citing privacy concerns. The Japanese government said it is in contact with both the detainee and their family, providing all possible support. International media reports have identified the person as a senior journalist based in Tehran, but this has not been officially confirmed by Japan's foreign ministry. Authorities in Tehran have not yet responded publicly to Japan's calls for release. The case adds to tensions as foreign governments monitor the situation for broader implications for diplomatic safety and regional relations. And now joining us now, we have Dr. Asta Chada, Associate Professor of International Relations from Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Japan. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. Now, what do you think about the potential diplomatic and political implications for Japan in publicly demanding for the release of this person? Do you think that perhaps diplomatic negotiations behind the scenes may have failed and they have turned to this public demand in response?
Right. I mean, we need to understand that sitting here in Japan, we really do not know who this person is, because Japanese government and, the national public broadcaster NHK have been very quiet about the identity of this said individual who, according to other media sources, does work for NHK. And from what we are hearing from outside of Japan media, this person was, reporting on Iran and had been working for the Middle Eastern desk for quite some time, and was posted in Southeast Asia back in 2017. But that's as far as we know. With regard to the Japanese government stance, I mean, we must understand that Japanese politics has also undergone a lot of change. The relations with Iran were, I would say, at best, at least friendly. That was up until Prime Minister Abe's administration. But under Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, the Japanese administration has clearly shifted its stance towards, the protest and the dealing of the protesters by the Iranian administration. And so we keep hearing from the Japanese government that their stance is turning more and more, out of favor with the Iranian administration. They are not supporting the actions of the Iranian administration either. And now adding fuel to fire is the arrest and imprisonment of the said person who's a Japanese national and potentially working for NHK, if that is the case. But anyhow, if this is a Japanese national who has been put behind the bars, apparently been made to stay in a facility which was meant for political prisoners, journalists, academics, so on and so forth, basically anyone who's raising a voice, in this intense period of civil unrest, Japan has taken this very seriously. Japan stands together with the G7, on its position with regard to the Iranian protests. What can they do? Well, we know now that the Japan-Iran relations stand at a historic low. They were never really very close, but given Iran's human rights record, they stand very, very low. Japan has maintained vocal criticism of Iranian administration, and now they're asking for release in the strongest of words. And it is very, very likely that Japan will continue to uphold this stance together with the other G7 nations up until at least this Japanese national is released from custody. So as far as I'm looking at this from a human rights perspective, Japan is very clear on its stance. As far as Japan-Iran relations are concerned, Japan is not going to take a step back, not specifically under this administration.
Dr. Asta, what do you believe could be the possible reasons for their detention of this person? Taking into account we don't actually know this person's identity or confirmed occupation even.
Right. I mean, you know, the basic, I suppose the information that's available out in the news is that, you know, this person is kept together in Tehran in a facility, like I mentioned, for anyone who was raising the voice against the Iranian administration, who was either in directly or indirectly engaged in, you know, together with the other political prisoners, or anyone who was a journalist or was helping and assisting journalism or an academic and was voicing very clearly any dissent towards the government. And looks like, I mean, if this person is in fact somehow related to Japan's public broadcaster, this would really, I would say, adversely affect Japan-Iran relations, because in general, at least for the basic freedom of speech that Japan has maintained, at least within its territory, it expects the same treatment to be given out to its own reporters abroad, no matter whether they're operating in a war zone or a conflict zone, or in case of any you know, political unrest. Given that background, if that is true, potentially this person could have been the Tehran bureau chief for Japan's NHK. If not, then as per the public profile which is available as of now, like I mentioned, Japanese government has not given out his identity. But if this person was in any way related, whether as a journalist or an academic or somebody who was participating in any sort of political rallying against Iran, then it is very, very likely that he has been you know, detained, or he has been put behind the bars specifically for raising a voice against the administration. And I think that alone says a lot about the situation you know, in Tehran, not only for the citizens but also for people who are trying to report from there.
Right. Dr. Asa, please don't go very far as we move to our next story in South Korea, where, according to US and South Korean military officials, South Korea and the United States will conduct major joint military drills known as Freedom Shield from March 9th to 19th. The exercise is described as defensive in nature but has long been a point of tension with North Korea, which views it as a rehearsal for invasion. The drills will also support preparations for the transfer of US wartime operational control to South Korea. South Korea aims to complete this transfer by 2030. While President Lee Jae-myung has sought to improve ties with North Korea, these efforts have so far been rebuffed. Discussions on scaling back certain training aspects are ongoing, as the exercise will also address North Korea's nuclear weapons threat. Let's listen to what military officials of both nations had to say.
한미는 연합방위 태세 확립을 위해 3월 9일부터 19일까지 FS 연습을 시행하기로 하였습니다.
Freedom Shield 26 is an annual exercise that is defensive in nature. By incorporating realistic threats, lessons learned from recent conflicts, and a challenging security environment, it will serve as an opportunity to further strengthen our readiness and capabilities to combine joint all-domain operations. This exercise will also serve as an opportunity to support ongoing preparations for a conditions-based wartime operational transition consistent with alliance.
And joining us again, we have Dr. Asta Chadha, who is an Associate Professor of International Relations at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, Japan. Now, Dr. Asta, how helpful is it for North Korean and South Korean relations for this exercise to be undergoing while they're in the negotiation of better relations between the two countries?
Right. I mean, at least here in East Asia, the fear of the eruption of a possible conflict, whether it is on the Korean Peninsula or close to the Taiwan Straits and something coming to Japan, it's very real. And the governments we see increasingly in East Asia are preparing for that possibility. So this Freedom Shield exercise, you know, which is primarily being conducted as a computer simulation exercise, is being conducted keeping in mind a hypothetical conflict on the Korean Peninsula. And we do know that, North Korean, South Korean relations have not been faring very well. Irrespective of what administration it is, there might be a slight shift of stance with regards to, how they envision the future relationship. But the current reality cannot be ignored, which is that both those countries do not foresee a peaceful future for each other, not in this tense environment. With regard to this exercise, together with the US, South Korea is an ally of the United States. This exercise is not just a projection of US presence militarily, but also US commitment. The fact that they are testing their operational capabilities, the fact that they are testing interoperability, does show that they are going to be involving more beyond computer simulation. They're going to also be engaging in field training maneuvers, which could become a possibility if US continues to maintain and probably even increment its defensive posture against North Korea by stationing its military on the South Korean soil, which is something, by the way, they also do here in Japan from time to time. But again, I must say that with a word of caution. North Korea, at least as we've been reading and hearing from their end, they have neither taken these drills as a positive sign of peace in any way. They have rather termed them as invasion rehearsals. North Korea also continues to conduct its own provocative missile testing, which again, continues to fuel this feeling of uncertainty and insecurity in South Korea, which is why US alliance continues to be very central to peacekeeping, any peacekeeping dreams that South Korea might have in the Korean Peninsula.
So just touching on what you said earlier, Dr. Asa, about how both South Korea and North Korea don't see a peaceful future in their relations. How do you see future threats like North Korea's development of their nuclear program affecting these relations, but also their joint future, the joint military drills between South Korea and the United States, but also the drills in North Korea?
You asked a very good question and quite relevant, given that for a long time in East Asia, I think ever since 2024, I think there has been this fear of getting US to be more engaged and more involved and more committed to the security in the region, specifically when it comes to Japanese security and South Korean security. Now, in case of this particular exercise, like I mentioned, North Korea has never viewed US military presence or US alliance with South Korea in a positive light, for obvious reasons. And hence, their provocative missile testing or their testing for nuclear proliferation is seen from a North Korean perspective as a necessity, as something that they need to retaliate against the US with. So that is seen as some kind of a leverage, I would say, which is why, irrespective of what sort of dialogues are being held between North Korea, South Korea, or what is the projected future of peace between these two countries and the politics, the way it works in the Korean Peninsula, nothing really directly answers to the fears of a major military demonstration or the possibility of future nuclear testing under the Kim Jong-un administration in North Korea. So those two are pretty much, I would say, they exist separately. So political talks about possible peace cannot go hand in hand in the Korean Peninsula together with US trying to conduct these security exercises with South Korea, because there is a basic rupture of trust that has been, as is that gap has been continuing between North Korea and South Korea for a very long time. And hence these continued exercises, whether they are involving United States, whether they project South Korean insecurity, or counter provocative missile testing that continues to happen again by North Korea as a response to US presence on the Japanese soil or on the South Korean soil, does reveal to us that East Asia continues to remain a very hot region with regards to the possibility of an outbreak of a conflict. So yes, I would agree with you. We do not foresee any cessation or any ceasing of nuclear testing by North Korea either. Rather, this is likely to provoke North Korea into further action.
Dr. Asa Chada, thank you so much for joining us today in the studio. Now we move to our next story, which is where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has stated that his visit to Israel is historic and will add new momentum to the bilateral friendship between both the nations. During the visit, Prime Minister Modi will become the first Indian Prime Minister to address Israel's parliament, the Knesset. His address is seen as a significant milestone in strengthening of bilateral relations between the two nations. Prime Minister Modi's visit comes amidst ongoing geopolitical tensions in West Asia. The visit will focus on deepening cooperation between India and Israel, particularly in defensive, trade, technology and innovation. Prime Minister Modi is expected to hold discussions with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on various issues, including regional security and economic growth. The visit will also include visits to the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Museum and an interaction with the Indian diaspora in Israel. Both nations are looking to set new goals for their partnership, with particular attention to areas such as agriculture, water management, and people-to-people exchanges. The trip is set to further enhance India-Israel relations, with a focus on security, cooperation, innovation, and building a resilient future. Authorities in Venezuela said 179 detainees have been freed as part of an amnesty process, moving at what they described as an extraordinary pace. Officials said the releases were carried out after legal reviews were aimed at reducing prison populations and easing pressure on detention facilities. The authority overseeing the process said additional releases could follow in the coming days. It added that the amnesty is being implemented in line with legal frameworks and security considerations. Rights groups are closely watching the process, calling for transparency and fair treatment of all detainees. And that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
The physics was known for quite a while, and so that I think it hasn't really changed our understanding the quantum world work.
Job with the James Webb Space Telescope was to look as far back in time as we could to see the universe as it was young.
Changing the basic attitude about what education is for and what it needs to be.
Biology, medical studies, they make great progress.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
The physics was known for quite a while, and so that I think it hasn't really changed our understanding the quantum world work.
Job with the James Webb Space Telescope was to look as far back in time as we could to see the universe as it was young.
changing the basic attitude about what education is for and what it needs to be.
Biology, medical studies, they make great progress.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things. And that
Hello and welcome. I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. We start this hour with some breaking news. Bill Gates has publicly apologised for his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, calling it a huge mistake. During a town hall meeting with Gates Foundation staff, Gates acknowledged that his meeting with Epstein was solely for philanthropic discussions and took responsibility for involving foundation executives in those meetings. He clarified that he did not engage in any illicit activities and expressed regret for the negative impact it had on others. Documents from the US Department of Justice revealed that Gates and Epstein met after Epstein's prison term to discuss expanding Gates' efforts. Gates also admitted to personal matters, including affairs with Russian women, but emphasized these were unrelated to Epstein's victims. As for actions against former Prince Andrew, he faced significant public and legal scrutiny following his relationship with Epstein, which led to his removal from royal duties and title. Currently, investigations into his conduct are ongoing, with questions about his involvement in criminal activities surrounding Epstein still under review. The case of Bill Gates is likely to raise similar questions about accountability, particularly as his actions have sparked wider discussions about the ties between powerful figures and Epstein. It remains to be seen what, if any, formal actions the US authorities will take in response to Gates' public acknowledgement and the ongoing investigations. Bill Gates has publicly apologised for his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, calling it a huge mistake during a town hall meeting with Gates Foundation staff. Gates acknowledged that his meetings with Epstein were solely for philanthropic discussions and took responsibility for involving foundation executives in those meetings. He clarified that he did not engage in any illicit activities and expressed regret for the negative impact it had on others. We are now being joined by Major General Sudhakar Ji, who's a senior geopolitical and strategic defence expert. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. The first question I have is, will the US take action against Gates? As we've just heard, the UK has taken action against Andrew, who is the King's brother, and has also taken action against Peter Mandelson. Do you think the US will do the same with Gates?
Good morning, Ellie. Thank you for inviting me for your show. Your question can be divided into two parts: desirability and implementation. Desirability, yes. A rules-based superpower as USA must take action, and whether it will happen or not, it is anybody's guess. Now, having said that, two more lines, if you allow me. for a country like United States of America, and if Epstein file is to be, the victims have to be given due justice, there has to be a comprehensive investigation. Since it has already reached the judiciary, I presume that there has been adequate investigation in past, whatever time, decade or more than a decade. If the investigation has not taken place, then there is no question of any cases of defamation. So it's my assumption that yes, some investigation is taking place. If the investigation has taken place, then the unethical or illicit relationship or support to Epstein file must be brought out in open domain, and it must be made public. Only then people like Bill Gates, when they apologize, we don't know what is beyond his apology. So all these things have to be gone into when you talk about whether United States of America will take action or not. People of America will do well to demand what is beyond what is coming or what is visible. So that is the need of the hour. Back to you, Ellie.
And what does Bill Gates' public apology and taking responsibility for his interactions with Jeffrey Epstein say about accountability for high-profile business leaders, and to what extent can an apology to his internal staff, how can this address broader concerns about the Gates Foundation and its global initiatives?
Yeah, great question. It is can be actually addressed in two separate heads. One is the legal responsibility or the legal overtone. The second is the moral accountability. When you talk about the legal accountability, to the best of my knowledge and understanding, I don't think apology has got any kind of a mechanism to overlook or oversee or ignore the offense which would have been committed. The nature of offense has to be taken cognizance of, and it has to be decided by a criminal court, because it is a very serious thing which is happening. The character of the nation, the future generation is affected if it is allowed to let go. So apology, as per me, means nothing. We must go into the details. If people of high profile as Bill Gates, whose name is ringing bells all over on social activities, selfless kind of involvement for the humanity at multiple places, that should not be taken advantage of to ignore any kind of illicit or unethical practice or indulgence that he would have had. Therefore, there is a requirement to investigate whether was he involved in these unethical practices, be in terms of financial fraud, financial support, or in the trafficking of women and girl children. Back to you, Lee.
And how might this controversy influence global partnerships, such as Gates' decision to withdraw from key events like the India AI Impact Summit that happened last week, amid scrutiny of his Epstein connections?
Great again. So the impact is, you see, the world order is also evolving by the day. We have migrated from 20th century to 21st century. We have been talking about rules-based order without any rules. So as a result, in absence of rules, the rules-based order cannot be complied with. In absence of rules-based order, the trust is going to be the biggest victim. So under the circumstances, there is lack of trust, and events are actually overtaking at such a speed that these events can actually take any kind of form and contour and start manifesting in a manner which the common population, which does not have time in the digital world and the social media world today, it will have least of impact as far as my assessment is concerned. The most important thing is money, unfortunately, can buy anything. It is for the world body, world organization to decide whether it should be allowed to go on like this, or we should put a stop to it. As far as the Artificial Intelligence Summit example that you have taken, yes, it is Artificial Intelligence Summit, which took place in Delhi, is a progressive milestone towards the global order, the new oil of the modern world, that is the oil, the data being the oil and the technology being the main driver. This is onto a kind of a realistic, progressive, forward-looking kind of a development taking place. And therefore, it will not have an impact on that, I personally feel, because the money has got a different kind of a ball game and different kind of understanding. But when it comes to the unethical practice like this, the host country or the country where this incident has taken place has a moral responsibility to investigate and take all these people, hold them accountable and take action against them so that the future generation draws a lesson out of it. Back to you, Lee.
And does this episode reveal gaps in the vetting and oversight practices within major foundations, and what reforms, if any, might strengthen ethical safeguards?
Absolutely, absolutely spot on. Your question itself has got the answer. I would say, why only talk about Bill Gates and his foundation? There are many such kind of foundations existing in the world, which actually are glossed over or ignored by the enforcement directorates of different countries. The surveillance and the monitoring mechanism has got very far and few staff to keep an eye on all such activities. Therefore, it calls for should be taken as a common challenge today by the global bodies. And we need to have a sharing of intelligence information, because it is not limited to the boundary of America. It has gone beyond that to Europe, gone to the Middle East, gone to the Asian countries. So therefore, it would do well if there is a comprehensive kind of understanding, some kind of an alliance, and counter strategy must be worked out so that the human trafficking, which is actually the central conduit through which these activities are being fostered or taken forward, is choked at a relevant point in time, so that they are brought to an end and they are not encouraged. So to ensure that you have a financial angle, transaction of money, then you have a human angle, then you have a supply chain, they have to be choked. Then you have the conduits who are operating at different country, different place, different way of life. Then you have the gang warfare. The whole ecosystem has to be studied in detail by a global body, and all nations as members of United Nations, they must be taken on board, or resolution must be passed in the United Nations General Assembly or the Security Council, because this itself would become a trigger or a future platform of any kind of activities related to terrorism, related to pandemic activity, related to compromise on national security. For all you know, USA would have compromised all the securities there because of Epstein file. Look at the high-profile people from Norway, from UK, from elsewhere. So this actually should ring a very serious bell in the minds of the people of United States. They must go into the details. More than anything else, more than the character and ethical values having been disrupted, it is the national security of USA which I am fearing would have been compromised to a serious an extent. Therefore, they need to take it up seriously.
Thank you. Please don't go too far, Major General Strategy, as I'll join back with you in just a moment. The UK government has agreed to release documents related to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's appointment as a trade envoy amid growing scrutiny over his links to late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. This decision follows Mountbatten Windsor's recent arrest, the first for a member of the royal family in over 300 years. The former prince, who served as the UK's special representative for international trade and investment, has always denied any wrongdoing in connection with Epstein. However, documents released by the US government suggest he passed confidential reports to Epstein during his time as an envoy. Lawmakers have called for the end of parliamentary conventions, shielding the royal family from criticism, with some demanding the immediate release of all related documents. The government has supported the move, but has warned that it may take time due to ongoing police investigations. We are now being rejoined by Major General Sadakaji. Thank you for rejoining us here today on NewsX World. What does the UK government's decision to release confidential vetting and appointment files of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor signal about parliamentary oversight and transparency in public appointments?
Envoy is a place of high office, I would say. It's an appointment of high office. And any appointment of high office, regardless, why talk about high office? There is a issue related, when you talk about Epstein file, there is an issue related to morality and immorality, ethical value and unethical value. So what value system? Britain is actually the protagonist of the international rules-based liberal democratic value system. That is the epicenter, the fountainhead. If the fountainhead of democracy, from where even America has taken birth, so has India and other colonial countries, then if they're okay with not coming out with the details, we have very little to say. But then the global organizations also have a role and responsibility. So if global organizations are not, baiting their breath or baiting their eyelids, then perhaps within the United Kingdom, the Parliament has got a very serious responsibility to discharge. They must demand for a very, very comprehensive 360-degree investigation, and be mindful of the fact that defamation, because once they start attacking character of a person, the person must be given adequate opportunity to defend himself. Because no liberal democracy will ever have its constitutional power or obligations given to the judiciary, which will be superseding all other aspects. That must be mindful of. That person has to live after he has been held accountable. So under these circumstances, I personally feel my take on the whole subject is that the investigation must be comprehensive. It must be taking a holistic view of everything, so that the security angle, the economic angle, and more than anything else, the safety of the citizen, of the people. You never know, it is only a tip of the iceberg. There may be many more people in UK who are involved. They need to find out who all were involved in that, in the financial fraud or transaction or the email communication. What are the IP addresses? Have they changed the portals? Or likewise, different kinds of systems would have been gone into while actually keeping in contact with Epstein and his travel to his island and back, different means of transportation, and the logistics supporting all these aspects have to be gone into, because I suspect that globally there is a scandal which is taking place, and in the umbrage of, or in the shelter of that scandal, there are things which could be interlinked with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, terrorism, which is a big threat to the safety and the security of the people. At the moment, India is the worst victim. Nobody would be talking about, but soon it may reach the soils of America as well. Therefore, there is a requirement of comprehensive kind of investigation required, and UK would do well if they, without coming down heavily, by being respectful to the fundamental rights, the human rights that one individual is entitled once he becomes an accused, they should go in for a very balanced and comprehensive kind of an investigation to actually hit the root cause and the impact it had on the ecosystem it was dependent on to survive and come that far. Back to you, Ali.
Thank you so much, Major General Sadakaji, for joining us here today on NewsX World. It was a pleasure speaking with you, as always. Thank you. US President Donald Trump has touched on his administration's efforts against Mexican drug cartels and his strategy on Venezuela in recent comments, claiming success in curbing cartel influence and advancing US security interests. Trump has pushed a multi-faceted campaign labelled a war on narcoterrorists, including maritime strikes on suspected drug trafficking vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific as part of a broader push to disrupt transformational crime networks. The drive against cartels has seen high-profile developments, including the death of El Mencho in a joint operation supported by US intelligence, a move Trump is citing as evidence of progress. He has also framed action in Venezuela, including a military operation that led to the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, as part of his administration's push to counter drug trafficking and strengthen regional security. Let's listen into what the US president had to share on this.
For years, large swaths of territory in our region, including large parts of Mexico, really large parts of Mexico, have been controlled by murderous drug cartels. That's why I designated these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, and I declared illicit fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. And this was an absolutely colossal victory for the security of the United States, and it also opens up a bright new beginning for the people of Venezuela. We're working closely with the new president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, to unleash extraordinary economic gains for both of our countries and to bring new hope to those who have suffered so terribly.
We are now being joined by Colonel Sanjeet Sirohi, who is an international relations and defence expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How significant is President Trump's call to Mexico about the cartels and getting rid of the cartels? How significant do you think it is to them, due to the fact of El Mencho's death a couple of days ago, and Mexico have been adamant that they used some of the state's services, but it wasn't down to them?
Well, first of all, good morning, Ali, and thank you very much for having me on your channel and discussing something important. Now, as far as Mr. Donald Trump is concerned, he has come into election mode because as the elections are approaching in November, he is trying to pat his back by saying all these things, that he has done a wonderful job, his administration has done a wonderful job in Venezuela by abducting Mr. Maduro and bringing him to the United States. And he's also taking the credit for Mexican, where this thing, El Mencho, was eliminated, which is the largest cartel of drugs, that is Jalisco New Generation cartel. So he is taking credit for all those, and it is basically an election campaign which he started off. But let me tell you, there is a broader strategy to it. Now, if he is saying that 70 to 80% of the drugs is coming from these countries, then he must also bear in mind that 70% of the illegal weapons which these cartels or manpower is holding, they come from the United States. So it is both ways the traffic is going on. The drugs are coming to America, and then America is exporting or sending the arms. So this is, one has to keep this thing in mind. Secondly, is the way his action is taken in Venezuela. I think it is a broader strategy. It is not only that he is going against the narco-terrorism. It is, Venezuela was basically for the oil, and now the Americans have realized that they have to secure their backyard, and South America is their backyard. So that's why now they have changed their focus from Europe to South America, and they are trying every bit to make sure that they dominate the South America by abducting Maduro from Venezuela. Now they are pressurizing Mexico, they are pressurizing Cuba, they are pressurizing Colombia. So all those regimes who are not very pro to Americans, they are being threatened by Mr. Donald Trump. Ellie.
And does Trump's emphasis on cartel action reflect genuine security concerns about organised crime and trafficking, or is it primarily a political narrative ahead of US midterm elections?
Look, it is for both. It is for both. Now he is very, very particular. He is talking about the drug trafficking which is taking place and killing thousands of people in America. So that is what he's doing is absolutely right. But he must also ensure that there are ways and means to do it. You cannot abduct, or you could not kidnap the president of the elected president of any country. That is absolutely incorrect. The intent may be correct, but the way the things are being done, is totally incorrect. Now, as far as the cartels in Mexico are concerned, he is saying that the Mexico government is run by the cartels. That way he is incorrect. It is not that the government is run by the cartels. Yes, there are drug cartels there, and the elimination of Al-Manchu was this was information, or the intelligence was shared by the Americans. Otherwise, every action was done by the Mexican security forces. So I think we must give credit to Mexican security forces also. But on the other hand, Mr. Donald Trump is taking all the credit for only the elections which are coming in November. Ellie.
Thank you so much, Colonel Sanjit Sawari, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has arrived in Beijing for his first official visit to China, accompanied by a large delegation of business leaders. In a key meeting today, China's Premier Li Qiang has said Chancellor Merz discussed strengthening bilateral ties and deepening practical cooperation. Li emphasized China's readiness to enhance dialogue, communication and mutual trust between the two nations. He noted that China and Germany's relationship is steadily advancing, with Beijing eager to promote even more meaningful collaboration. Chancellor Merz, in turn, expressed his commitment to fair cooperation, underscoring the importance of economic exchanges within China. He also called for open and honest communication as both countries aim to expand their economic interactions wherever possible. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
The physics was known for quite a while, and so I think it hasn't really changed our understanding the quantum world work.
The job with the James Webb Space Telescope was to look as far back in time as we could to see the universe as it was young.
Changing the basic attitude about what education is for and what it needs to be.
Biology, medical studies, they make great progress.
Hello and welcome, I'm Ruby Barlow and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the headlines of this hour. President Donald Trump declares a golden age of America in his State of the Union address, defending his economic record amid sliding approval ratings. With Republicans fearing midterm losses, he credits himself with lowering inflation, cutting taxes and drug prices, and driving stock markets to record highs. Trump delivers his annual address amid falling poll numbers and a Supreme Court ruling that strikes down most of his signature tariffs. He largely sticks to script but turns combative on immigration, trading, shouted barbs with Democratic lawmakers. President Donald Trump signals he may order military action against Iran, saying he will not allow what he calls the world's top sponsor of terrorism to obtain a nuclear weapon. Despite building up US forces in the Middle East, he offers limited detail on why such a strike would be necessary. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Israel for a two-day visit aimed at deepening strategic ties as US-Iran tensions raise fears of regional conflict. Modi, who made a historic first visit in 2017, seeks to build on growing defense and diplomatic cooperation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Chancellor Friedrich Merz begins his first official visit to China, pushing to reset trade ties and address strains on Germany's manufacturing sector. Meeting Premier Li Qiang in Beijing, both sides back free trade amid US tariff disruptions and sign agreements on climate and food security. The United Nations Security Council expresses deep concern over escalating violence in Sudan and calls for an immediate end to fighting. The Council condemns drone attacks on civilians and aid workers, including multiple strikes affecting World Food Programme operations. Japan says it will deploy surface-to-air missiles to its western island of Yonaguni by March 2031, signalling a stronger defense posture near Taiwan, heavily on the US economy, immigration and patriotism, while framing his first year as a golden age for America. Despite Democrats bringing survivors of Jeffrey Epstein as guests, the president made no mention of the newly released Epstein files. The speech also significantly avoided discussions on recent violent immigration enforcement incidents, such as the deaths of US citizens Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minnesota at the hands of ICE agents, and details of mass deportation strategies that have polarized communities. In foreign policy, key issues like Cuba's oil blockade and tensions in Latin America went unaddressed, and there was no reference to trade or strategic outer territory interests, such as Greenland. Critics contend these omissions reflect a campaign-style address designed to boost Republican fortunes ahead of midterm elections, rather than a comprehensive overview of major controversies facing the nation. Now, joining us live in the studio, we have Mark Sutherland, a geopolitical commentator from London. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now, what do you believe is the overall significance of Trump not addressing some of the controversies in his State of the Union, such as Greenland and Cuba? Do you believe that a president would normally touch on these international disputes in their State of the Union, or is it an attempt to just gloss over some of the more controversial issues that his administration has been facing lately?
Respectfully, I don't think, in my humble opinion, I don't think it is actually glossing over. I think it's diplomacy. I actually think there are many, many things that are going on in the background. Some of those I've discussed on NewsX over the last few months. And it's down to departments to then sort that out. The key thing is, as President Trump has often said over the years, you don't show your hand, you don't show your enemy what you are then about to do. We go back to the bombing last year in Iran and the B-52s and suddenly appearing and doing that, and all the ins and outs of that leading up to that. So there is I would say that I would put that forward as well. The Greenland argument with Europe, all of that, there are negotiations that are behind the scenes, and as you've seen, like when the King of Denmark has gone over there, showing, to then glad hand and join in with the people that are living there in Greenland. That's all this diplomacy, but there is much action that's going on. And of course, when you're referring to Cuba, there's lots of history there. Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK, and the people of Cuba, yes, they need releasing from a communist regime. There are many relationships between a lot of people that have fled Cuba, then gone to live in Florida. Mark Rubio's family, of course, with all their Cuban links, and also Ted Cruz. These are, I believe, it's what's going on in the background. But I will say this, of course, his naysayers, the Democrats, we had to view Ilhan Omar.
Mark, you touched on Minnesota. Do you think that American voters, Democrats and Republicans alike, will notice the fact that Alex Preddy and Renee Good were not mentioned in his State of the Union, seeing as they were two very high-profile deaths in the domestic situation recently?
It's extremely sad that those two people died, and in the circumstances that they did. But the other thing is that, remember, President Trump's base, he promised to sort this out and to remove illegals from America. There are many bad actors inside America. It's not conspiracy. There are many bad actors. But the other thing is, and also we can say this, both sides have to be respectful. It's very important of this in regard to no one being above the law, but illegal immigration as in other countries, including here, is also a huge issue and has to be addressed. Now, the ins and outs of why he didn't mention that, of course, the opposition, his opposition, and others will make hay